Do you remember springtime 2020 when things started getting weird with the old Rona, and then it led to a bunch of delays and a bunch of media because it was kind of tricky to how do you get to the workplace safely and stuff? Yeah, you remember, that sucked. It was a kind of tough couple of years there that we all haven't properly processed yet. But anyways, all of those delays got to get pushed somewhere, right? And that somewhere happened to be 2023 for a lot of video games. There have been so many video games this year, and we haven't even gotten to September, October yet, and there's a huge chunk of games dropping then too. Don't get me wrong, I'm not complaining, and I just wish there was more time and money to play all of these games, but this list is probably going to look very different by the end of the year, but I figured it'd be a good time now that we're actually halfway through the year, folks. 6 months have happened. That is half the year. Why were people doing this at the beginning of June? To talk about some of my favorite games of the year so far. Okay, let's get started. Hello gamers and multifaceted enjoyers of media. My name is Danny with the DMGT, your new favorite place for all things music, gaming, and tech. Okay, so let's get right into it. I'm going to start off with a couple of games that I don't normally put into the best of the year because I just don't think that remakes should be contenders for game of the year because they already exist unless they completely revamp what the game is and reimagine it, like a Final Fantasy VII remake, for example. However, if I didn't mention Resident Evil 4 and the Dead Space remakes in this video at all, people would be in my mentions and screaming about wait a minute, you don't know good games. And I do know good games, okay? But these are remakes. Anyways, these were done really well. This is what a good remake looks like. It's not just a remaster. Both took all of the elements of the original games that made them so beloved in the first place and then improved upon them, which is the right way of doing it. Like the Last of Us PS5 remake, these are now the definitive way to play and experience these games, which is particularly nice if you've never played these before. So go play Resident Evil 4 and the Dead Space remakes whenever you get the chance, assuming you can handle spooky, scary, kind of gory type games. I don't think this game's going to be on many people's lists, but it should be. Tchia went very under the radar. It's on PlayStation and PC. I did a review on it that nobody watched, but I do think it's a potential contender for indie game of the year. It's obviously very Zelda inspired in its open world, but it's very charming. The cozy gamers love this, and doing things like taking over animals to improve traversal and not just do the glider that every open world game seems to be doing is a really cool, innovative way to traverse the open world. You can crush out the main story in less than 10 hours, and maybe the whole world exploration something like 30 to 40. If anything, exploring that possession mechanic is a cool way to see how indie games take risks and how eventually other major studios grab those innovations and make them mainstream. Speaking of indies, even though this one was published by Bethesda, HiFi Rush is a fun time. I made a review on this one as well. It's just good old classic platforming mixed in with rhythm gaming. I think it does that really well. The sort of quirky acting and writing that's sort of held back Forspoken a little bit is here as well, and I don't like it that much. But as far as the core gameplay mechanics and the game itself, it's solid. Although I think its biggest strength is its art style. It is very cool to look at, very comic and anime inspired. I don't think it's an actual game of the year contender, but probably is going to win indie game of the year. Final Fantasy 16 is a game that flirts with greatness. I'm going to get into more detail in my review coming up soon. This game favors action-oriented gameplay over traditional RPG elements that Final Fantasy as a franchise typically does. I don't think it's a bad thing, although there are some quirks with it and the side quests are pretty bad. But the voice acting, the boss fights are all incredibly done. The Game of Thrones meets Attack on Titan inspired story is solid. It doesn't commit all the way to those elements. It does fall back on some typical JRPG Final Fantasy tropes, especially in the second half, which in my opinion is what is part of the issue and what makes it flirt with greatness and just fall short. But the major action set pieces are literally jaw-dropping. I'm in awe whenever I'm watching and playing through those sections, so that keeps it on my favorites of the year so far. It probably is going to stay here by the end of the year as well. Street Fighter 6, of all the games in this first half of the year, this is the most raw video gamers video game. It's just video gaming in its purest form. The World Tour mode and the modern mechanics to engage new gamers is reinvigorating the fighting game genre and sort of propelling arcade style gaming back into the mainstream a little bit. And don't let the FGC purists tell you that modern controls is hurting this game. No, if you actually get good, going back to classic controls and really mastering the gameplay is encouraged here, and you're going to whoop the modern control players in the long run. You just have to take the time to actually learn it, and I think it's good for the longevity of this game. Like, I can't remember the last time I could actually sit down on a couch and play co-op and like spend hours playing this game with other people. It's really that fun. In a normal year, I think Street Fighter 6 as a fighting game is a real contender for Game of the Year. It's just unfortunate that this year happens to be so sacked, but Street Fighter 6 is very good. My current dark horse that isn't going to win Game of the Year, but is my clear second, is Diablo 4. I've seen a lot of chatter from the ARPG veterans saying that Diablo 2 was still better, but that's an all-time great game. So for someone that doesn't normally play these types of games, I'm having so much fun. I am constantly thinking about this game. The story is actually decent, the voice acting is really strong, and the sound design might actually be better than Tears of the Kingdom. It's really well done in this game. I'm enjoying the endgame content, the loot system works well enough for me, and the gameplay loop keeps me coming back with different builds and wanting to create different characters. Before I get to the obvious top game of the year so far in 2023, let's have some fun and talk about some honorable mentions and some dishonorable mentions. Honorable mentions to Jedi Survivor. I just haven't gotten around to it yet, that's why it's not on my list. Minecraft Legends is actually decent as a real-time strategy game. If you're looking for a spooky time indie game, Dredge is something that I would recommend checking out. And Pizza Tower is this Wario Land sort of inspired game that has gained a cult-like following on the internet. Dishonorable mentions go to the obvious Redfall. What a disastrous launch from Bethesda right on the heels of HiFi Rush, and I think the Potterheads are going to be upset at me. I don't care. Hogwarts Legacy is a mid-game. It is an uninspired open world. The story's pretty generic. The side quests are repetitive and there's a lot of fetch quests, and the gameplay is not as complex as people made it seem. For a game that's about magic, there's only a limited amount of spells that you can actually do. Okay, and to no one's surprise, the current game of the year and best game of 2023 is The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. I expect this to hold through the end of the year. You don't need me to sing its praises again, especially if you already saw my review of Tears of the Kingdom, which thank you by the way. It's exactly what a sandbox open world should behave like. It improves on everything from Breath of the Wild, and while not without its flaws, I think the combat system can get improved. Performance, for some reason, people aren't admitting that is actually a little bit choppy, but the raw gameplay itself and story makes up for all of it. This is already an all-time great. I just don't anticipate anything releasing this year topping it, even if Starfield hits on most of the things that they're promising. Even at the midway point, I think 2023 is already one of the strongest years in gaming ever, but the second half of the year has the likes of Pikmin 4, Baldur's Gate 3, Armored Core 6, Starfield, Mortal Kombat 1, Detective Pikachu Returns, Alan Wake 2, Spider-Man 2, Super Mario Bros. Wonder, City Skyline 2, which I'm personally really looking forward to. This is going to be a tough year to make a final top 10 list, so we'll see what it looks like at the end of the year. Thanks for watching, like and subscribe. I have top 10 albums of the year coming up next. I do music stuff too sometimes, you see my shorts. Anyways, thanks again. My name is Danny with the DMGT. I'll catch you next time.